Welcome to the Docs Who Lift podcast, where we distill and simplify the complexities of a healthy lifestyle, exercise, medicine, and weight loss. We're excited to bring you a podcast that's a prescription for clinical practice, scientific recommendations, and just real life. This is the Docs Who Lift podcast.
And welcome back to the Docs Who Lift podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Spencer Nadolsky, co-host Dr. Karl, endocrinologist, and we got back our favorite immunobiologist, Dr. Andrea Love, PhD, and we together, we're going to be talking about some of the stuff with our favorite friends, Calley and Casey Means. And this whole, they were on Joe Rogan recently. Of course, we get all these DMs that are like, can you talk about some of the things they're discussing? We'll talk about some of the recent social media stuff that, Andrea's been posting about it. Andrea goes hard on social media. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
She goes hard. I don't know how she has enough.
I tend to go soft.
I don't have the professional restrictions because I'm not a healthcare provider. So my content's never going to be perceived as medical advice. So I can really call out the nonsense, where I know Spencer, you in particular,
No, that's not true. Spencer likes to post filleting his vegetables and stuff, but
that's true.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't have any. He doesn't work for a real healthcare system. I do for a little bit longer, for 4 more months.
But my job is well aware of what I do, and for the most part, it's separate, right? And I'm not a healthcare provider. I'm a scientist, so it's all kind of behind the scenes stuff. And I have feelings. So
yada yada yada. We're a good team because we can have it always.
Okay, so let's just get the elephant out of the room. We all agree that we would love to improve our food environment, right? That's kind of this big push for Make America Healthy Again. This is the RFK.
And everyone's been saying this for a long time. I want to set that precedent up first, because
this isn't
a lot
new.
of what these guys go on here and say is that
100%.
somehow they're the ones opening the or what do you call it? Removing the curtain.
Right.
What's behind the curtain?
Casey Means kind of starts the whole thing with, doctors don't deal with behavior modifications, and they don't talk about lifestyle, and they don't talk about exercise, and they don't talk about healthy diet, and that she didn't learn this in med school. Well, let's be real. She was in the middle of a head and neck surgery fellowship. She dropped out, so she can't practice medicine. So she's not a clinician. She's not board certified. It wasn't in any sort of lifestyle related medicine. And she started a wellness company to sell glucose monitors to healthy people. So she doesn't actually know what continuing medical education entails for actual practicing physicians.
Right. Exactly. So ENT doctors, for anybody out there, they are surgeons who go to, long residencies.
Wait, why don't you talk about who these people actually are? So people
okay. All right. Well, so these two people, Calley and Casey Means. Now, I had heard of Calley Means because he's been antagonizing people on the internet. I didn't even know he was married to a physician.
No, sister.
It's his sister? I thought it was his wife.
No. They're brother and sister.
Oh,
yeah.
Boy, they sure didn't come across. Wow, wow. I was completely bamboozled on that.
They're siblings. Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting.
So they wrote a book together, all about how you can hack your metabolism and how everybody's mitochondria is dysfunctioning because of all of the toxic food and all of the this and the medical. And they parrot the lie that Marty Makary has propagated, that medical errors are the third leading cause of death, which was a manipulation of a really bad study. But they've essentially made a name as these people who are in the wellness industry that are now kind of on the right fringe, but they sell pseudoscience, right? Casey Means she has a medical degree and she uses that to appeal to authority. Oh, I was trained at Stanford, but she always leaves out that she didn't complete her training. So she finished medical school, but she didn't do anything beyond that. She can't practice medicine. She wasn't even training in any sort of field of medicine that would have to do with even general practice, right? She was looking to specialize in a particular type of surgery, nothing about metabolism, obesity,
Right.
endocrinology, anything.
Yeah.
And she dropped out, and she claims it was because she saw how the medical industry didn't care about people, and they were just promoting sick care and not health care. But it was so she could start a wellness company that sells continuous glucose monitors and an app, and, a la Glucose Goddess and all of that. And her brother has zero scientific or medical training, and he has a wellness company that sells all of the supplements, all of the boutique supplements, the Thorne and the this. And it also sells your cold plunges and your saunas and your this. And not only can you purchase direct, but he's convinced companies to put his products as qualifying for FSA and HSA. So now you've got this, these wellness products are now covered by your FSA and HSA account to give it more legitimacy, but he's literally just selling unregulated wellness nonsense.
But the concept of what is marketed through that, if I'm not mistaken, is not a bad thing. And I think we'd all agree that it's like using HSA, FSA, and I think we'd all agree that insurance should cover gym memberships, exercise
100%.
physiology, nutrition classes, and all that stuff. So I feel like that's how it's sort of marketed. But,
exactly. And the corporate, whoever's making these decisions for these companies, like, they probably don't know, like, the difference between legitimate wellness health interventions and the pseudoscience he's selling. So, it looks very appealing, but there's not data to support the things he's selling. There's data to support behavior modifications, exercise, making produce more affordable and accessible, but of course their beliefs are antithetical to all of those things.
Yeah.
And so we got this brother and sister who are basically trying to say that our healthcare system and whole system is corrupt, and that they have the right answer to it, right?
Yep.
And that they figured it out somehow.
This is a very classic marketing technique. It's almost like a Trojan horse. We've talked about this before. Andrew Huberman has done this. Many people have done this, where you bring in the truths. I would say big food is probably incentivized
a lot we agree on
to get people to eat more of these high calorie, easily overeaten foods. So they try to make foods that people will buy more of, and unfortunately, it's causing people to develop obesity. So we all agree on that thing. But then it's like, and now I'm the one that has the solution. It's like, whoa. Not any of you have ever been in public health before. Public health has been trying to get people to be physically active forever. It's not like, and so here's where it comes in. RFK, for people, what is his relationship to JFK?
What is he, a nephew or something?
He's the nephew of JFK. Yeah, he's the son of Bobby Kennedy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he was running for president, and then he dropped out and endorsed Trump. There's a whole thing there. We don't have to get too political here because we're going to try to stick to the science. But the gist is that this guy, again, says we need to make America healthy again.
Yeah.
And to do that, he wrote out this tweet, like the CDC and a few other agencies are suppressing exercise.
Right. Yeah.
Good food, and even mentioned ivermectin, which we'll get into there, and a few other sunshine as well.
Sunshine.
And it's like, no, like if you look at public health out there, been trying to get people to eat better, and there's some, people can debate on what's eating better. People are going to debate on the USDA guidelines, but like nowhere have I ever seen exercise being suppressed by anybody.
No.
It's in the major guidelines. We wrote a very cool blog 10 years ago. In fact, I would say it's the greatest blog. And
check it out. It's on MedPage Today, Lifestyle.
It's the best. Anyway,
you have to do the hand motion.
Yeah. We pulled it out. We wrote this because people keep saying, see, doctors and healthcare agencies
they just want to give you lots of pills. Yeah.
But if you look at the major guidelines, the number one, it's always lifestyle. And so they all say it.
Yeah.
It turns out that it's really hard to get people to do these things.
Yeah.
And so Robert F. Kennedy is not the messiah, and all of a sudden the one guy that thought we should that people should be doing it. We all know physical activity is good. So we all agree on that type of thing.
Yeah.
And we all tend to agree on the problems of our food environment. People have been saying that forever. And all the data that these guys cite and kind of, and they even go, oh, everyone's going to call us alarmist on this podcast with Rogan. But that's because they come across as alarmist.
Yeah.
And people have been working on this forever. They have published nothing in this regard. I did look up, by the way, what Casey Means has published. And because she was doing ear, nose, throat, otolaryngology residency, etc., I found, a few things she published while she was in her training. And in fact, one that is up my alley because it gets into thyroid cancer. So that's her only thing that's even close to metabolic anything.
Yeah.
And then really that's not, because it's a thyroid cancer thing.
Right.
And that's why she was doing it, because it's surgery.
Right.
But they throw out all these alarming statistics, which are true. And we all know. And guess who published those? The researchers, the real doctors, all these other people, all these years trying to figure out, what can we do about this? And now they're just pretending that they're somehow the ones that are doing something about it to sell their stuff.
Well, and the other
not to
thing
correct
is,
you, Andrea, on Casey Means, just real quick, if she did pass her,
no, she didn't.
I assume she got through internship. So internship is that first year after medical school.
She might
So
have
if
gone
that's
through
the case,
internship.
so then I just looked it up.
At least.
She does have an Oregon medical license, so she can technically practice. It doesn't mean she can practice under her board. She doesn't have a board specialty. Is that
nobody's
that's my
hiring her to do
understanding?
surgery anymore? Let's just say that.
Yes. So just
medicine.
so people don't try to play gotcha on here.
She's not board certified. Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So she can practice, but not under her board certification. Just
no
quick.
No credentials to do any surgery anywhere anymore.
That's been.
Yeah, you can once you get a license,
that's wild.
Yeah, you can. It's wild. Insurances wouldn't cover her services.
Yeah. That's why you have to pay them a lot of money to get the CGMs that they should be getting from primary care or endocrinologists, only if they need them.
Well, and this is the thing, right, Spencer? You talked about lifestyle behavior modification. So on that podcast, they basically said that they talked about pediatric obesity and they inflated the numbers. They said it was like 40% or 50%. It's closer to about a third. But regardless of that, right, they said that the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, which I have some issues with on some other things, but that they weren't advocating. They were saying, well, you should just take Ozempic. And that was the first thing they say is exercise, diet, active lifestyle. And it's medication only if, you need augmentation, right? But they vilify things by wildly mischaracterizing what actually are clinical guidance. And then when they're talking about, obesity and things like that, they pin it or they blame it on singular chemicals, right? And they make it this whole thing of privilege, right? Because they're also anti-genetic tools for more affordable and nutritious agriculture. And they demonize conventional produce, which is half the price and the same nutrition. So, well, yeah, you should eat vegetables, but only if you're rich, because of course, we also don't care. We're talking about obesity, and what are the biggest factors that determine this is access to food, income, access to healthcare. And so if you look at poverty rates and obesity, those directly are related, but they don't want fruits and vegetables to be available to people of lower income. And instead they want to say, well, it's the chemicals in your food and it's the pesticides, when that has zero to do with why we're dealing with obesity. And then, of course, they ignore the fact that the reason that we have complex chronic diseases is because we're not dying of infectious diseases, which we might soon if RFK gets his way and he pulls all the vaccines off the market. So,
that's what worries me.
Yeah.
That's my biggest worry. So this Make America Healthy again. We want we are on board with more exercise.
Yes. And
we want people to eat more whole, nutritious foods.
Absolutely.
However, these details matter, and I think public health professionals give them more resources. Then the people that understand this stuff,
don't defund them more.
Yeah, please don't. Right. So, what was this podcast about?
So they go on Rogan and they introduce themselves, and they introduce it as, we're going to talk about something very dark today, and it's all about setting the stage. As you were talking about, this is like the playbook for marketing grifting 101 that you've learned about, Spencer. And so they
Yeah.
just start talking about how dark everything is. They make an analogy to the opioid crisis. They try to connect Calley's training in political science. He worked, I guess, as a lobbyist maybe for big food and big pharma, which, yes, there are some significant problems there, right? But they make that analogy, then they jump right to the Ozempic for 6-year-olds as the first line. First of all, and it drives me insane that everyone calls every medication in this class Ozempic. Please, Ozempic is
It's the
weaker
Kleenex.
shot
It's
for
the
type 2
Kleenex.
diabetes. I cannot
It's
handle this
Kleenex.
anymore. Anyways,
It's the
okay.
Kleenex.
So then, and then they,
Ozempic
God,
is the cleanest of GLP-1 agonists.
It's
and
Coke.
so they go on, and then Joe, and Joe goes, "Oh my God, I just can't believe this." And how are you guys the ones leading the way in this? And they go on to claim, "Oh yeah, it's guys like Elon and Trump and RFK Jr. and Rogan and Huberman calling all this out." I don't know why they have to make it political, because that is what's sowing even more distrust into the two sides. We're all on the same side. This is why people hate politics, right? Because we're using these like nuanced misinformation and disinformations to split each other up, when the people actually doing the research for all these years that these guys are getting their citations from and and exaggerating and stuff, they're the ones doing the work, and they're the ones who have been raising the alarm on obesity, ultra processed foods, exercise, the risks of obesity. And mind you, they get all into, I think you alluded to this, they get into the endocrine disrupting chemicals. They really try to tie all this together. Big government, big food,
it's all the
big
chemical
pharma
exposures, and it's not
and
social determinants of health and a lack of a national health care program, and the lifestyle factors, and of course they use the citations, but they only pick the ones that they like, right? If you pull a different citation that refutes a claim, well, they don't like that one's corrupt, but that one, they like.
Look
that
at the funding.
Well,
Look at the funding.
And don't get me wrong. So, and then the other thing about this whole endocrine disrupting situation is that this is a problem, right? And they are not the ones who have talked about this. The Endocrine Society, one of my societies, endocrinology, obviously, they have been publishing on these data and coming up with consensus, more research ideas and stuff since 2009, at least. And so this has been a movement trying to figure out, they talk about all these nanoparticles of plastics in all of us, and it's like, so there is some truth. And this is, like Spencer said, when you start with truth and then you pepper in the misinformation,
that's exactly
it's a problem.
Right.
Yes,
we
have a problem with endocrine disrupting chemicals, but they're not the ones that we should be looking for information on it.
And also, and Karl, I'm I know about this, but like these chemicals are like classes of thousands of chemicals, right? And so there are certain ones that fall into that bucket that we want to be aware of and study and understand, like how it actually is involved in hormone signaling and hormone interference. But it doesn't mean that carte blanche, like every single one of these chemicals are automatically disrupting the endocrine system. And, even the ones that have some early data, say in animals or say some observational stuff, like there's a threshold, right? And so all of those things have to be taken into account with the actual science. But, this is the new buzzword, right? And so you say hormone disruption or endocrine disruptors, and they talk about parabens, and Mark Hyman is now talking about parabens again. And you look at the likelihood or the binding affinity to estrogen receptor, it's 10 to 100,000 fold lower than estradiol. So the amount of that substance that would actually interfere with hormone signaling is, you're never going to hit it, because the amount of parabens that you're ever going to be exposed to is minuscule, and it's not going to outcompete your actual hormones. And so that context matters, and these people are doing it so they can sell you on the false idea that your safety agencies don't care about your health, but they're the ones that care about your health. And in order to give them the power to help you take control of your health, we have to deregulate all of the infrastructure that actually do the science.
Not to do appeal to authority, but like, who are you gonna trust? The Endocrine Society, who's literally the scientists are doing the studies on the specific endocrine disruptors, or Calley Means, who has not a single iota of scientific background.
Can I
Who has
just
what, that doesn't even make any
And
sense.
Casey, who went through otolaryngology surgical. I have some great ENT docs. I know one of them is listening right now, and he's the man. And I send all my patients to him. Thank God. But he, those guys come to us for the metabolic, health data and
Yeah.
discussions and stuff. So it's
Well-
just kind of crazy. But
Well,
people don't know that. The lay public doesn't understand that all the
right,
time. I don't think.
absolutely. Right. They're like, well, she is an MD. And it's like, yes, but she basically just finished medical school. Like, she doesn't have any specialized training.
Stanford.
And definitely,
Stanford.
all right, listen, I taught medical students right before they graduated, and they knew almost nothing about microbiology. Just saying.
Yeah. We have to know. There's like this cool book that taught us, the different catalase and all the different types of microbiologists, and we had to study it
your clinical, your unknown test, and they're all cheating off each other on the unknown test.
So we had to know that, but
And I'll tell you one thing for free. As an endocrinologist in my specialty, I don't remember that stuff. So don't get fooled that all the other specialties somehow remember everything we learned in the basic science of medical school and every specialty. That's not how it works. That's why we have specialties.
Yeah, and that's why scientists have specialties and scientists and healthcare providers work together. But, the funniest thing with Calley is that, he puts on these airs like he actually knows science and even basic math. And then, of course, he was trolling me on Twitter the other day, and he used a cancer prevalence graph to suggest that cancer rates are skyrocketing because he didn't know the difference between prevalence and incidence. And of course, it lumps everything together, all cancers, no rate, no normalized by population. But literally what his graph was saying that he thought was some big gotcha moment is that outcomes due to cancer are better and people are living longer.
That's Epi 101.
Yeah. Basic statistics. Come on, bro.
Very basic stuff.
Yeah.
But
well, explain to the people listening what that means, though, because not everyone, that's the problem. He doesn't understand it.
Yeah.
So the people listening don't understand it.
So Calley and Casey like to talk a lot about this chronic disease epidemic, right? And beyond the obesity, they also talk about mental illness. They also suggested that psychiatrists are just dosing people with SSRIs if they're a little sad. And you know what, as someone who actually does take medication and lost their brother to suicide, like, it's super offensive and also false. But then they also lump in the endocrine, the hormone stuff, the PCOS. She just lies about all these endocrine conditions.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the cancer comes in. And so they say, and I'm going to blame the media a lot on this because they do the same. They take a single chemical and an animal study, and they're like, this is causing cancer, and cancer rates are skyrocketing, which is not actually what's happening. But yeah, so I was posting about, he actually commented on a post where I was talking about genetic engineering, but he led into cancer because he was insinuating that genetic engineering causes cancer, which is wild. But basically what he did was he posted a graph that was looking at like projected number of people with cancer from, the 1990s to the 2020s. And then there was a future projection to like 2040, right? And like, it was loosely parsed by age groups. And what you see is that each of them have an increasing chunk as time progresses. And so what this is saying, and it was just raw numbers, right? So it's just total people. So it's not accounting for the fact that the population around the world is growing.
Not a percentage. It wasn't even a percentage.
It's not normalized to like per 100,000 people, but it's also not looking at number of new cancer cases. It's looking at total number of people walking around with cancer. And so now, because we have better early diagnoses, we're able to catch cancer sooner. We're actually able to diagnose more cancers. So even though in certain instances rates may appear to be rising, it's often because we're catching them now where we wouldn't have caught them until they progress to later stage. And people are surviving with cancer because cancer isn't an automatic death sentence, especially for many cancers. And so all his graph was saying was that health outcomes are improving and people are living longer. And cancer is predominantly a disease of aging because 80% of cancers are in people over 50. The probability that someone under 40 is going to develop cancer is about 0.5%. But they're using this to suggest that there's this epidemic of cancer, and it's because all these chemicals and the foods and the pesticides and the endocrine disruptors and the plastics, when in reality, many cancers are actually declining in both incidence and prevalence. So incidence is number of new cases, prevalence is total number of people walking around with the condition. And that's because of public health, right? HPV vaccines. Now we're seeing
Mm-hmm.
declines in cervical cancer, anal cancer, throat cancer. We're seeing huge drops in lung cancers because of public health interventions to stop smoking. We're
Mm-hmm.
seeing declines in other types of cancers like colorectal cancers, particularly in people over 50 because of colorectal screening and lifestyle interventions like eating fiber. But of course, like none of that nuance is in there. And he's trying to promote this falsehood that cancer rates are skyrocketing when that's not true. And you can't lump all cancers into a single category.
Yeah.
And
This
I
is
don't quite, what I didn't catch with them, they do all this like, sort of, I guess, a hyperbole almost and all this stuff. And yeah, they kind of talk about what they're blaming it on excessively, but I don't really ever catch what their proposal is other than to sell everyone
Oh
their
no.
book and
Yeah, no.
CGMs and stuff.
They don't have
And
a
so like,
proposal. Yeah.
and ironically, I feel like, they kind of, they try to make this a political thing, and then they kind of go, they support the Trump RFK, whatever. And it's kind of ironic because it almost sounds like they're trying to say we need more big government regulation
Mhm.
over all this
That's
stuff.
very
And
ironic.
yet it's supposed to be kind of more in a conservative wing. And again, we're not going to try to get political, but I mean, basic political stuff is like conservative is a little bit, supposed to be smaller government, more efficient, less spending, all that stuff. But they actually kind of, they reference some of the other countries where, oh, these are illegal in Europe. Well, I thought kind of the right side didn't want more regulation like Europe, but I don't know. We do have a lot of political dysfunction. My God. So they're not
Yeah. Oh,
wrong on that.
yeah,
We have
for
a
sure.
very dysfunctional medical system. They talk about the silos and all that stuff. We've been raging about that since we were in medical school. Everyone knows that.
But
How to
the
fix that is a
irony
problem. But
the irony
but
is that they oppose a national healthcare program, which if you actually look at other developed nations, they spend less money per person because they've got they have taxpayer contributions to their medical care, and then they're not paying out of pocket. But here in the US, it's often refuse because of, you don't want the government overreach by the conservative side.
Mhm.
But then people are like, well, it would increase our taxes. But they don't actually think what they're paying out of pocket for, their copays or their,
Well, just for the insurance premiums
deductible. I
themselves.
have I have a high
I hate big
deductible
insurance.
healthcare plan, and I spend on top of what I pay into my healthcare plan. I have a huge deductible that I have to pay off
Mhm.
before I get healthcare. And like, so people don't look at the total investment, and the data say they spend about half as much. They have longer life expectancies. They have better health outcomes because once you have that sort of program, people are using the healthcare and they're using it for preventive care where you're going to catch things before it becomes an urgency. And so as a result, they're going to be overall healthier, have better outcomes, have less complications due to all these chronic diseases that they're screaming about.
Mhm.
But that would require the government to be involved. And so it's like antithetical to their whole shtick. And it's, and they talk, of course, Calley and Casey also went to the Kellogg's, Scream show with Bonnie Hari to tell Kellogg's to swap one food dye because that's going to solve the nutrition
Mhm.
issue.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, as Spencer was like, well, they're banned in other countries, except they're not banned in other countries. And different countries have different political systems, and who makes the laws?
Right.
Politics, not scientists. But on top of that, they're harping on these like singular chemicals, and they're omitting all of these other confounding variables for what actually would improve health outcomes. It's not swapping a single food coloring. It's not demonizing conventional produce and improving access to fresh fruits and vegetables for everybody, not just whether or not you're rich. And promoting exercise and not convincing people to spend money that they don't have or don't need to spend on useless interventions. And on
Yeah.
top of that, they're aligning with Maha and the Trump campaign, and they're talking about food safety. And Trump gutted food safety funding for FDA and USDA, the people that do inspections for food safety, food contamination, food processing, produce and animal products and all of these things. And so they've cut funding for food safety, yet they're screaming that our food isn't safe enough.
And then RFK wants us to drink raw milk.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Right? Isn't that what he said in that tweet?
No, he did. Because that's what the ancestors did. Because foodborne illness only killed, milk-borne illness only counted for 35% of foodborne illness in the 1900s. So, and now it's less than 1%. So we should definitely go back to the way it was before the pasteurization ordinance existed.
Have we told the story about Dad, Spencer? I think we have, but so our dad was a biology teacher in high school. He was a total biology nerd, loved all this stuff, probably would have been a great doctor. And it was several years ago when we were trying to explain to him all the crazy people online trying to push the whole raw milk thing. And he looked at us confused and goes, "What? So they all think Louis Pasteur is full of shit?"
Yes.
And apparently they do.
Yes, Dad, they think Louis Pasteur is full of shit. That's exactly right. They think that, well, first of all, they think that, foodborne illness isn't an issue. Well, it's because we pasteurize things. That's not an issue anymore. And then of course, they also make all these false claims about the nutrient density, which is just patently false. Pasteurization, I won't rehash it, but pasteurization is like high temperature for a very short period. It doesn't degrade the proteins measurably. It doesn't deplete the nutrients. It doesn't alter any of the benefits of the milk. What it does is it substantially reduces the risk that you're going to get violently ill from drinking that thing that came out of an animal's udder.
Yeah, listeria.
Campylobacter.
Listeria.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? We're talking about listeria a lot, and people are like, oh, well, it was the deli meat, and listeria is literally everywhere, right? The reason it gets into food is because it's in the soil, it's in animal poop, it's in the groundwater, it's growing amongst the produce. And so the food safety measures we have are to eliminate those exposures that would contaminate the food that gets by the time it gets to you. Because even fresh produce is processed.
Yeah.
And they want to, Trump has already gutted the funding for a lot of those food safety measures and would certainly do more of that. And also, who knows, they might revoke the pasteurization ordinance. So now you don't even have legal guardrails to ensure that your dairy is safe.
That would be terrible.
It's all kind of ironic.
So just to back up and just kind of show this overall picture. Yes, to more physical activity. This is what they do. This is the show. So everybody understands this marketing technique. Hey, they're saying that they're not pushing physical activity. Not true, number one. They're not pushing exercise. Not true.
It's absolutely not true.
One. We're always pushing it. Big organizations are pushing it. It's hard to get people to do that. Okay, so they put that in there. They're not telling people to eat whole nutritious foods. You go to the guidelines, people are trying to get whole nutritious foods. There's some debate about carbohydrates, fat, meat, whatever. But from the most part, if you look at the guidelines, they're saying limit your sugar intake. Yeah. They're not telling people to eat sugar.
No, nobody's telling people to not processed food.
I'm just gonna, like when I say it's okay if you have a cookie every now and then, they're like, oh my God, you just said that your whole diet should be cookies? No, I never said that. I said that you should have a diet high in fiber, whole grains, produce, and it could be frozen produce because that's just as nutritious and in some cases
you're
more.
allowed to have a treat.
And you're allowed to have a treat as long as your entire diet isn't just treats.
Yep. So they push those things, and so everybody's like, yeah, and then they're gonna go and raw milk, and you're like, wait, hold on a second,
and no vaccines.
And people and no vaccines, and people like, okay, I guess these guys are pushing the good things, so I guess these other things are good. So it's a Trojan horse, whereas no, we're all pushing those good things. Vaccines in general are good. They have greatly benefit. In fact, I just saw this. So I always have to put this almost every other week. Doctors don't get paid for writing certain scripts. We don't get paid. I don't get paid more for writing Ozempic, Casey's favorite drug.
Highly illegal, by the way.
It's highly illegal. But a couple of people commented no, but insurance companies do give you reimburse more money if you vaccinate more people. And I was just laughing about it because I'm just thinking, okay, you're playing this gotcha card. What's funny is that I'm talking about big pharma paying doctors for writing scripts.
Right.
Ironically, insurances are paying more because they know they're going to save more money by getting more people vaccinated. You stupid mother.
They're going to be healthier. It's exactly why most insurance plans have a surcharge if you're a smoker, because they're going to be paying more because you're automatically at higher risk for a variety
I don't
of
get paid.
outcomes.
I don't get paid more for vaccines.
No, you don't get paid because you just charge everyone cash. But just to be
cash
clear,
money records.
I want to say
I got accused of getting paid to administer vaccines. I was like, I don't even administer vaccines except to animals.
And neither do I. I recommend them as the endocrinologist for people at very high risk. But I will say, so that, the insurance thing, I personally do think our big insurance system with our medical system, this is one of the areas where I do agree with one of their little points about, and this is why people fall for this stuff. Our medical systems and specialties are siloed. We are not paid appropriately. The basic ways insurance companies have been paying doctors for all these years has not evolved fast enough. So there's still this pay incentivization for volume rather than quality. All the different systems are trying to find a way. I personally think it's on big insurance and a little bit of big government, because they work together on finding a way. And that causes frustration. So primary care doesn't have time for patients, the whole list of issues. And then they send out all the referrals. We have these silos when we all should be working together and paid to do quality work. So that stuff is all true, and I do agree with that stuff. But then I don't know what, they never even say how they're going to fix that. They just say buy my CGM and supplements.
And the problem is that there's a huge issue with the way our healthcare is administered in this country, but they're blaming it on the doctors, right? It's not the doctors. It's the fact that political and financial incentives have created a capitalist infrastructure that administers healthcare in this country because of political motivations, that actually does harm to the healthcare providers and the patients. And they use that as a way to erode trust in the actual science and the medicine, because they conflate the two. And that's a common tactic, because they do the same with agriculture tools, and they conflate modern agriculture, which actually would allow us to further reduce pesticides, improve yield and stability of foods, increase nutrition, and they conflate it with a single chemical company that doesn't even exist anymore.
And that's kind of the thing. Like, that's another one of their points that I'm pretty sure everyone agrees on. How to deal with it is a different problem. So yes, I think we all think all the money that goes into lobbying for, big processed food and farm insurance and all these different things, when there's a problem there. But it doesn't mean the people trying to do the science, by the way, for free. She talks about, they're going to, NIH and all these places, everyone's bought and sold by everything. We know a lot of people who do only research, and it's darn near volunteer work, by the way. All the publications, I mean, every bit of little academic stuff I've done, and it's not as much as a lot of people, has been a lot of time I spend for free. Think about the people that really are doing the front lines of all the research for NIH. They are not allowed to have any conflicts of interest. They're not allowed to get any other money from anything. And we know some of them, one of whom has done a lot of the research on the ultra-processed food issues.
Yeah. I mean, a postdoc, postdoc salary, someone out with a PhD in biomedical science, I think now it's maybe $60,000 starting out. I mean, it's not a lucrative career. It's because people are legitimately interested and passionate about these topics. And then of course you have the people that sell out and start podcasts and sell pseudoscience and have $40 million AG1 contracts. But that's another story.
Yeah, that's the other problem with this episode. It was a 2.5-hour episode, and half of it was taken up by commercials.
Yeah.
But that's why Rogan's making so much money. He gets so many people.
Yeah.
I mean, we could, I don't know. We're sucking wind because we want to make sure we only get sponsors that are up to our.
We get all sorts. I get emails about sponsorships every single day, and I'm like, I could never, if I do this, there goes all my
I got one yesterday.
We have ethics. We've been.
I got one yesterday, and it was Healthletics, I think is the company, and they were like, "Well, Huberman just talked about NAD supplements on his." I was like, "Have you not read the room?"
Yeah, they don't care.
Have you read my Slate piece? So the other thing is that, of course, they again tried to conflate infectious diseases with all these metabolic issues, because that goes to their central thesis that, it's all these mitochondrial metabolic issues. She said, Calley said COVID was a metabolic issue. They've, of course, I think what's her face, Candace Owens, just said that like polio was, some metabolic thing. But of course, they're selling a book about how you can hack your metabolism, and she's selling a continuous glucose monitor. So of course, if you can tell people that, all you got to do is fix your metabolism, and he said, if you were metabolically healthy, you didn't die of COVID. That's demonstrably false, because we know that there are risk factors for infectious diseases, and that relates to things that impede the ability of your immune system to function. And obesity happens to be one of those things, because there is a very intimate connection between that inflammatory process that's going on with obesity and your immune system. But there were lots of otherwise healthy people that died of COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. Obesity, and then any more severity of obesity, like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, etc., and all the other things, absolutely increase the risk of death. And they're the ones that needed to get treated with vaccines primarily. But everyone died from it. Not everyone. I'm saying everyone across, different types of people died.
Right. And that's exactly true, because you're looking at things that are compromising cardiovascular function. You're looking at things that compromise, normal organ function, and the immune system interacts with all of these different systems, right? If you have a risk factor, and it's not just metabolic issues, right? If you're a smoker, if you have asthma, like any sort of thing that makes you at higher risk for respiratory pathogens, those things do put people at higher risk. But yeah, there were lots of people who still got infected and still died, even if they would, check all the boxes and didn't have any of these underlying conditions.
Yeah.
So what do we need listeners to? People are going to listen to this podcast and be like, "This is 45 minutes of them just ranting about these."
What I want to say is, we have come a really long way. Like, this whole Make America Healthy Again thing is just really kind of first ass backwards. Hopefully I can say ass on here, but we're now, we have more medical innovation. We have more scientific knowledge. We have more guardrails for health and safety and all of that than we ever have. These people are actively undermining those things that actually have improved health. It's not to say that our health is perfect, because we've already acknowledged that there are issues. But if we want to further improve health, it's not the things they're saying, right? It's not scare people from conventional produce and the pesticides used on them, and tell people that they should only buy the expensive organic produce, which also uses pesticides, none of which are inherently safer. What it is encourage preventive health. Preventive health includes health screenings, includes vaccines, includes behavioral modifications like exercise. Improve access to food, not just for rich people, right? How can we improve food access, especially fresh foods, frozen produce, for people with lower socioeconomic status? Well, we need to expand things like WIC and SNAP and all of these government safety organizations, but they actually want to defund those some more. Improving healthcare access, because we know we have huge healthcare disparities between the affluent and people in poverty, and that skews our life expectancy data. So how can we improve healthcare access and equity in this country? How can we encourage people to exercise? Can we get bike lanes? Can we get walking trails? Like, none of those things are actually being talked about by them. And those are the things that actually make tangible impacts on health, as well as improving the tools that our food producers or farmers have to make foods more nutritious, higher yield, reduce the pesticide use. And these are the things like genetic technologies that they scare people about and tell them that they're causing cancer.
So it reminds me of the quote by Ben Goldacor. I think that's how you say his name. There are problems with Boeing planes, big jets. So, okay, let's go take a magic carpet instead. So in this analogy, the magic carpet would be this RFK
whatever they're
and
doing,
whoever else, because it's like, no, they're not the solution. We know there are problems with the system. We know people need to exercise. We know people need to eat better. But these guys don't have the answer. I can promise you that. They have no training in it. And in fact, Calley Means came after me when I was at Weight Watchers. He was like, this is the medical director for Weight Watchers, and he's promoting a GLP-1 agonist. Once the big lawsuit comes and the big ball drops for these GLP-1 agonists, are they going to be held accountable? And I was like, hey, man, is this you? And I tagged him and his cold plunges and supplements that he's selling. I'm like, you think you're going to solve obesity with your bone broth? This is like, you have, like, if people listen to this guy and see what he's promoting, it's insane. You have to lack all scientific rigor in your body to even think this guy has the answers when he's promoting bone broth and cold plunges. Get out of here, man.
Right.
Well, and I guess my final, thoughts are, as I was listening to this going, I was just getting infuriated because they set the stage for like an hour talking about, look at what's going on. It's so dark, all this, the big pharma, big, big agriculture, big processed food. Everyone's getting obesity and diabetes, and our kids are going through puberty earlier, and it's the plastics and the herbicides and the endocrine disrupting chemicals, and they do all these citations that they have zero expertise in. So they are using everyone else's work to try to sell their grift, but everyone else is doing this. And then they say, why is nobody talking about this? Why do you think they're talking about this? Because all the research is being done. Everyone is talking about this. And that drives me crazy. So that all the people doing their volunteer time on the research, trying to do something about this, maybe they're the ones being suppressed by the lobbyists, like Calley was doing once upon a time for Big Pharma and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But the science of Big Pharma is good too. We're the ones
getting the death threats and being called shills.
Yeah. And then they say, they talk about some truths that we all agree on. The medical systems and specialties being siloed. We all agree on that. We shouldn't be paid and incentivized for volume instead of quality. We got to help primary care. Yes, we think there's probably a problem politically with all the lobbyists and all the money. Yes, we need more exercise. Yes, doctors feel like we're kind of stuck in a broken system. We're all trying to rail against that machine, but not all of us have ethical substandards to then grift CGMs and supplements and cold plunges and bone broth that don't actually work. We promote evidence-based things. And you know what? If someone wants, in fact, this makes me want to quit and go just let Big Pharma pay me to give educational talks, since everyone says we do anyway.
And the other thing I think is, aside from the fact that they don't have any solutions or any infrastructure, it's just, well, you can't trust the government. You can't trust the safety agencies. You can't trust the scientists. You can't trust the medical providers. But you can trust us because we're super altruistic and we're not millionaires or anything like that.
Yeah.
And of course, even the studies they're citing, they're cherry picking them and they're, mischaracterizing them because they don't actually know the science that they're talking about. And, the whole thing is just this creating this performative outrage to further undermine the people that are actually trying to do the tangible work, Karl, that you're talking about. And it does such a disservice to, any sort of forward progress. And then those of us who kind of, take our volunteer time to debunk this stuff because their full-time jobs are being grifters, our full-time jobs are in health or science. And we spend all this extra time and energy and bandwidth that could be so much better served actually doing patient care or science that would tangibly improve health and society and all of these things that they claim to care about, but their actions demonstrate they don't actually care about.
Yeah. And we're all supposed to be on the same team, but they create this divide.
All right. Well, this was almost 50 minutes of just, look, I don't even know if the listeners, they probably see I get patients that are like, hey, what do you think about so-and-so Calley and Casey Means? I'm like,
that's why we're doing this, because they all messaged us after this episode.
There you go. There it is. These guys are full of it.
Boom.
Exercise is good for you. Eating good foods is good for you. If there are endocrine disruptors that we should stay away from, let's figure it out.
Go to the Endocrine Society webpage and check it out.
Let the experts sort it out. The other thing I learned on Twitter the other day is that Democrats don't exercise, and because I run marathons, that must make me, I don't know. It was weird. But that's
You gotta be a
part of it.
right winger.
I gotta be a
God,
right winger because they.
God, I hate politics.
But
That's so
liberals, they don't
ridiculous.
exercise because the FDA is suppressing it, obviously.
Before I end the
of course.
podcast, I posted about ivermectin not being useful in COVID,
Way to go, Spence.
and it was all the Republicans, for whatever reason, started attacking me. I'm like, no, this isn't a political thing.
No,
it's just science. Whether
This
you're
has
Republican,
nothing to do with science.
independent, libertarian, Democratic, super liberal, progressive, whatever, you can literally look at randomized control trial. And then they were saying that I was gaslighting everybody because like my grandma got better, and I was like, yeah, my friends got better from doing nothing.
So,
whatever.
Yeah, survivor bias. Yeah.
So I got one more little nugget. So I was talking about how I have this awesome ENT colleague where I send all my patients who need surgery on their thyroid, parathyroid, all this other stuff. And so he's outstanding. And I sent him a message to ask, like, have you ever heard of this Casey Means? She's an ENT doc. She may or may not have finished residency, but she doesn't do surgery. She just does this stuff. And so he looked into it and he just texted me. He says, you should apologize for making me hear of her. She seems to be a whack job. I'll leave it at that. And he's a very trustworthy surgeon. I would absolutely go to him for anything if I needed something.
So, all right, go listen to our CGM podcast if you need to understand whether you need a CGM or not. Yeah, we actually did a podcast with Jillian Michaels. It's not out yet. It's not ours. It's hers.
She says January, February, maybe.
We did talk about what Dr. Andrea was talking about, how cancer rates cancer prevalence could go high from something called a detection bias. We see that with papillary thyroid cancers. We talked about that. Getting more ultrasounds on people can show more cancer, but they're just going to keep having it. So you'll see more cancer, but people are not dying at any quicker rates. Full body MRIs are going to start finding all sorts of different things that may or may not be. Yeah. So then all of a sudden you're going to see the prevalence higher, but that doesn't mean that people are getting more cancer. It was there. We just didn't see it before. So that's called a detection bias for anybody's listening. So share this with anybody that's like, hey, I've heard this stuff about RFK, make America healthy again, and kind of want to understand how these guys use marketing to kind of push their agenda.
Yeah.
Here's our outro. Make sure you follow Dr. Love on what's your Instagram handle?
At Dr.Andrea Love.
At that whatever Andrea whatever I can't even
at Dr.Andrea Love
whatever. Okay. Is it Dr. DOC or
DR?
There you go. Okay, we'll put it in the show notes.
That's fine.
All right, here's our outro.
This podcast is for entertainment and education and information purposes only. Remember, the physicians on this podcast are not your physician. It should not be considered professional or personalized medical advice. It should not be used to replace speaking with your physician or medical professional to discuss your specific health concerns. The topics discussed should not be used solely to diagnose or treat any condition. As a result, we are not responsible for any unwanted medical outcomes. The views and opinions discussed are of those of the host only and do not represent those of any other entities.